Hello, everyone, and welcome. It's been a while. I'm recording as I can with what I have available while my PC is still down. So, anyways, I mentioned that I would talk about the Matrix Resurrections at least a little bit briefly and give my thoughts on it because I have some what I perceive to be a fairly unique perspective on it, which I will get into later. But initially, I'll talk about just, I guess, from the objective standpoint of anyone who's just going in and sitting down and watching this movie. It's not as good as the original, and I would also argue that it's not quite as good as even the second one. But that's up for interpretation, I suppose. A lot of people were kind of down on that movie. In any case, the reasons why, I guess, is because the plot of this movie is very, very similar to the plot of the first movie. It's kind of retelling the first movie in a way, and I guess that's where the Resurrections title comes from. But it doesn't tell the story quite as well as the first one did, and the fight scenes are not as well shot as the fight scenes in the originals. It feels like in the originals they were kind of trying their best to pay tribute and homage to kung fu movies that had come before them, and in this one it was just lots of loud banging and close-up tight shots to where you couldn't really tell what was going on some of the times, instead of these just really well-established shots that were being done. It felt like every movie had kind of cool little gimmicks they added on. Of course, the first movie had the famous bullet time that everyone afterwards copied, but this movie didn't really do anything interesting, I don't really think, with the fights. They were just fights, and they weren't particularly well shot fights, and they weren't terribly interesting either, I suppose. But as far as, I guess, the little bits of the plot that were continuations from the previous storyline were interesting to hear about, because I'm not crazy about it, but I'm pretty deep into the Matrix lore. So I was interested in seeing what they did with the aftermath of the robot human war, and where humanity left and where that went, and how the Matrix had to evolve and change to fit the new scenario of the machines promising that they would let the humans out if they wanted out. So how the Matrix would evolve with that kind of policy in mind. But so from just a basic standpoint of, is this movie as good as the first one? No. It's not a great movie. It's okay. There's a few parts of it that were maybe my brain was just not functioning properly, but were kind of confusing and not incredibly well explained. But I'm usually pretty good about catching on to those kinds of things. But for some reason, some of the things in the movie didn't quite sit with me. So I guess I'll mention what the basic plot is. I won't spoil anything. I'll try not to spoil too much in any point of this discussion, but I have to at least tell you what the movie's about, right? So it's Matrix Resurrections. So Neo and Trinity are still in the Matrix, even though they died at the end of the third film. So it's the mystery of how are they still there, or is it even still them? Because in the world where you have a virtual reality where computer programs are walking around and talking, sentient AI. Just because you see a person in the Matrix doesn't mean that they're real, or that that's really them, even, or any of that stuff, because you can always just change your appearance, right? So, with some difficulty, but the machines can always change your appearance. Like when the agents overwrote people, they became agents. They weren't just still that person. So, from that standpoint, the movie starts out with kind of like the first one did, I suppose, where Neo doesn't know about the Matrix or what it is really. He doesn't. He has flashbacks, of course, of what had happened in the original film trilogy. They kept track of it. So in a way to kind of obfuscate for him that the memories that he's reliving were actually real, they kind of put him in a position where he is a big time head of a entire game creation studio, and they created a series of games of the Matrix, and the plot line of the games was what happened in the movies. So anytime he gets little flashes and thinks like, "Oh, I actually lived this," they can always just tell him, "Well, no, you didn't live it. What's happening is you became a little too obsessed with your work. You got a little too into it. So now you're mentally projecting yourself into those games, and you think that they happened because you put so much of yourself into the games, but that's not. None of it actually happened. You're just starting to have a little bit of a mental lapse. So it's all about him figuring out who he is again, and breaking out of that conditioning, and becoming the one again. So, from my standpoint, the movie is insanely interesting to me. I liked it quite a bit, but not necessarily just because of the movie itself. So I have to get into that a little bit. There's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that goes on. It's going on in this movie, and that's kind of some of the stuff I liked. Some of the stuff I liked in the original trilogy was delving into more of what was going on. I know on the surface level, it's some of the discussions are very, I'm 14 and I'm deep kind of discussions. But I was not too much older than that when those movies came out, so it kind of appealed to me, and it was a good introduction to philosophical thought and some, I guess, philosophy in general, religion. And using symbology for religions for certain aspects of the movie, and that kind of thing. Just kind of delving into some of the moral dilemmas that happen from something like that. The idea of if someone's living in a fake reality but they really like it, should we just leave them in there? That kind of thing. So I delved into the kind of the discussions surrounding the movies a lot. So that pulled me into it quite a bit. And a lot of little fan theories that came up because of the movies and some of the things that are mentioned. For instance, they called Seraphim wingless at one point in the third movie, I believe it was, and there's all that stuff about that. About of course, his name is Seraph. I'm sorry. So obviously he's what angels are based on, and the fact that he at one point had wings. He had to have, because they call him wingless. So what happened to him? And it seems like he worked for the Merovingian at one point. So what was that about? All this stuff. There's a whole thing you can get into, and they had an MMO that was coming out that was supposed to move the plot forward. But unfortunately, that game was really, really awful. I'm not sure exactly how far into telling the story after the third Matrix movie they got, but I didn't get into it because the game was just so awful, and it got dropped eventually and didn't become a thing. But the Wachowskis were, supporting it at some point. So the idea of continuing the plot after the three movies was not a foreign idea. However, the behind the scenes in this movie has, as I said, caused quite a bit of issues and controversy, I suppose. So Warner Brothers is being sued by the investors, I believe, because of what happened in this movie, or with this movie. So the first thing that happened was they did a simultaneous release between movie theaters and streaming services. HBO Max, I believe, is what it was on. And the investors, movie companies are still highly tracked for success or failure based on box office earnings. So if you are giving someone an alternative to going to the box office to watch the movie at release, and you're not counting those towards the success of the movie, it makes the movie look bad, really bad. And not that the movie was doing great in the first place, but it makes it look even worse. And of course, with Scarlett Johansson's lawsuit over the Black Widow movie being released on streaming services and in theaters at the same time. I think it was released in theaters, yeah. She won that argument because her pay for the movie is tied into how well it does at the theater. So if you're doing something to make it where the theater is losing sales by your own actions, then the people who are paid based off that are going to have a problem with it. So the investors at Warner Brothers have a problem with it. And on top of that, because the movie was not great, they are also claiming that the way that Warner Brothers conducted themselves about the making of this film caused irreparable damage to the franchise. And given that it's a pretty massive franchise, people still talk about these movies a lot to today. If you talk about virtual reality, The Matrix comes up even today, as old as the movies are. So the question then becomes, why would the investors blame Warner Brothers for the movie being bad? A lot of times, you hear about movies being bad, but a lot of times it's just like, oh, the director didn't do anything right. The actors did badly, that kind of stuff. You can blame it on the people who actually made the film directly, and not the company, the company that released the film. So why is that? Well, for that we can get back into the plot of the movie. As I mentioned, Neo was, Neo. I'll call him by his real name. He was working at a gaming company, and they had their Matrix games, and they're really good. They're really popular. Everyone loved them, and everyone played them. Well, his boss calls him to the office one day, because even though he's the head of the creative team, he's not the boss. His boss calls him into the office one day and says, "Look, the higher ups have set down an ultimatum. They want another Matrix game. And their ultimatum is they are going to make this Matrix game whether you want to make it or not. So it's in your best interest to just go ahead and make the game for them." So that is relevant because that is what Warner Brothers did to the Wachowskis. The Wachowskis, are the ones who made Matrix films. It's their baby, pretty much. It was their idea and their loving project for many years and 3 movies. So Warner Brothers came to them and said, "We want another Matrix film, and we're going to make it whether you want to or not. So you better just do it." And I don't know if you guys have had very many interactions with people, but when you provide that kind of ultimatum to somebody, they tend to not like it. And they tend to lash out and fight back against that, which is what the Wachowskis did. So the whole first section of the movie where Neo is trapped in the Matrix is all about the hellscape that is being under that kind of ultimatum and that kind of pressure of, you're going to make this thing that you loved, that you nourished and you treasured and you put your heart and soul into. We want to pump out another one, and we'll do it with or without you, and whether you want to do it or not. That's not a good position for anyone to be in, and it's kind of crappy to put someone in that kind of position. And I have to assume they did it because of some kind of I think if you don't do something with the property after so long, you lose the rights to it. So maybe that was coming up. I don't know, but regardless, that kind of thing is not something people react well to, and the Wachowskis obviously did not react well to it, and that's part of the movie not being good. That's what I'm blaming a lot of the movie not being good on, is they This wasn't a passion project. It was just something that they were being forced to do, or else all creative control would be taken away from them completely in going on in the future, which I'm sure they did not want to have happen. So that's where it is. Just to give you another thought about it, it's so bad that Keanu Reeves was interviewed about the movie, and he said that the Wachowskis were making fun of the first Matrix movie. He said it in a loving way, like they were just poking fun at it in a loving way. But I wonder about that. What the movie would have been like if they had actually been taking it seriously. Yeah. So, and as a final aside, another little interesting tidbit I noticed in the beginning portion of the movie. So Neo caves, obviously, and says, okay, sure, we'll make another Matrix game, fine. So he's a man in his... How old is Keanu Reeves? Is he 253 years old or something? In the Neo, the character of Neo is supposed to be like, I guess, in his 40s at this point. So he's working at this game company. He's spitballing with the creative team about what should we do with this new Matrix game? How can we make it new and different stuff? And he's working on a team with a bunch of people who look like they were just out of college, early 20s at the latest. And he's sitting there at the table listening to all these people who are not even like tangentially aligned with the original thought of process behind the making of the games or the movies in the real world. And it's basically like him sitting down and listening to this focus group. Almost like they're supposed to be his, people helping them brainstorm ideas for creating the new game, but it's almost like he's forced to sit down and listen to this focus group of people who aren't involved with the original creation of the idea at all, who aren't really tied to it, and they're all telling him what the Matrix is about. Oh, it's about the kung fu. Oh, it's about the gun battles. Oh, it's about the love story. Oh, it's about man versus nature, or man versus himself, or all this all these ideas that they're throwing out there, and it's like it's all these out of touch head up their ass young people telling the creator of it what their creation's about, and it's just incredible. I have to believe that was based off something in real life that had to have been for the Wachowskis. They had to have had a similar experience or something. They had to have. And I think that was a reflection of that in that movie. So yeah, that kind of stuff was interesting to me. And there's some other stuff that you can probably read into. Like I said, they were convincing Neo that all his memories of his previous life, of what happened in the Matrix movies, were all hallucinations of him going in. And the way they were doing that was Neil Patrick Harris was his psychiatrist, and his psychiatrist was convincing him, that this is what's really happening. You're not, you're hallucinating. You're just out of it. You don't know what's real and what isn't. That kind of stuff, undermining him and keeping him down. And I'm would have some theories about who his analog in the real world would have to be, because even in the original movies, the Wachowskis kind of put themselves into the movies and told about their own struggles through the movies. That's not new to this film. One of the Wachowskis is trans. They're Lena Wachowski now, and they weren't transitioned for the making of the original three movies. So that's why it was the Wachowski brothers back then. It's just the Wachowskis now because one of them is Lena now. So they were going through that at that point. I mean, obviously. So a little bit of that is in the movies. Some people have made allusions to the idea that Switch was originally supposed to be a self-insert from Lena, where they were supposed to be. I think I forget which way around it was. Either their image of themselves in the Matrix was a man, and them in the real world was a woman, or the other way around. I can't remember which one it was, but that was supposed to be the Lena expressing their trans status within the game movie, but they ended up not doing that for some reason or other. I can't remember why, but yeah, these movies have always been about what's going on with the Wachowskis, their thoughts, their feelings, them expressing philosophical viewpoints and ideas through the movies. And this one is, and so that's just carried over into this movie. Unfortunately, it was in a insanely negative way. And I'm sure for years and years to come, as more interviews come out and they open up more and talk more about it, we'll learn more about some behind the scenes shenanigans that was going on between the Wachowskis and the Warner Brothers. I'm almost certain of it. Stuff's going to start coming out at some point. And it's just unfortunate because I do like this franchise a lot. I like the ideas of it, and if you're not like diehard gung ho like I am, I wouldn't recommend the movie. Honestly, just watch the first one or the first three if you are more open to the second and third one not being quite as good. But yeah, anyway, thank you all for tuning in, hanging out. See you next time.